So I was one of those people who was like, oh, divorce is not an option because I was, socialized and taught that divorce was definitely not an option. And then, of course, when that kind of a message comes to someone like me who had, a difficult childhood, dysfunctional family, I was so my entire identity was wrapped up in my relationships, marriage, and having that marriage and having the, you know, 2.4 kids. Well, in my case, it was more kids because, I was part of the homeschooling movement. There was this whole image of what it meant to be a woman of faith and to serve and to, you know, fulfill my role that
Get it.
kept me in denial that my marriage wasn't viable. I had come into the marriage thinking that I was going to fix all of the things that went wrong in my family of origin by being this virtuous person who was able to do it. And so when things happened in my marriage that were obviously not right, that were obviously ugly, that were obviously toxic and abusive and harmful, I just kept going. I just kept
Yeah.
thinking I was gonna fix it. Okay, after this book and after this, work and, I would throw myself into all kinds of activities, working full time. And then when I wasn't working full time, I was homeschooling the kids and I was cleaning and then I was running the healing room at church and all
Oh,
of and
yeah.
so towards the end of the marriage, like, my husband really went over the line in several areas, and I was like, "Okay, I gotta change some things." Still didn't occur to me that this wasn't viable, so this was around year 14. So I started reading about boundaries. I was like, "Okay," 'cause, the book Boundaries was written by a Christian. I was like, "Okay, you know, this is the fix." That was, like, my new fix. This is now the fix. So I read the book about boundaries, and I started setting boundaries. Well, he had gone 15 years with me not setting any boundaries. He was not
Right.
there for it at all. And so, in many ways, things escalated after I started setting boundaries. So, one of the boundaries I had set was, hey, we need to get counseling. We got counseling. He got psychologically evaluated. He did have a mental health issue, but he would not receive medication. He did not stay in therapy. And so, but at that point, I think he started realizing that, oh, things are going to change, and he didn't want that. And so he actually started changing our financial situation without me knowing. So our LLC that we owned together, he had started diverting funds from that to an LLC that he owned alone. And I guess you could say for about 2 years he was planning this, and I had no idea. And
Mhm.
so that's why it blindsided me, not because the marriage was perfect and I was just
Right.
surprised, but because I thought I could fix it. And I was so narrow in my thoughts and in the way I read the situation, again, denial, that I didn't start setting boundaries until I started seeing things that were affecting my kids. So it was almost like I was okay being the recipient of all of the toxicity. But when it started impacting my kids, I was like, okay, well, I'll just start setting some boundaries. And that's really what triggered it. So I didn't have the courage to file. I didn't even have the clarity. I talked to my clients about having clarity. That's the first step. You've got to have clarity. And then when you have clarity, you've got to have courage to be able to do what you have to do. I never had clarity the whole time. And I don't even know that I would have had the courage at the time. I'm such a different person now
Yeah.
than I was, that I know that, like, if it was, and I think it was the best thing that happened to me. The fact that he filed the divorce during so whenever he would get into like a rage and start being unsafe in the home, I would take the kids, go stay with my best friend for a few days, come back. It was this rinse repeat cycle that I had with him. And so I was just like, okay, we're gone for a couple of days. He'll calm down. We'll go back. And it was during one of those times when I was on the phone with him, talking to the counselor. He was supposed to attend counseling with me, blah, blah, that he filed. He didn't even tell me that he had filed. I found out because someone called me and said, hey, I have a friend who works at the court and they saw your name come through.
Wow. Do you think that he did you a favor because do you feel like you would have eventually done it in terms of filing based on where you were at that time? Like he gave you the ability to he gave you that permission to be free, even though that's probably not what you were thinking at the time, but just
Yeah, I mean, he definitely did me a favor. I'm so thankful that he
yeah.
filed. I'm so, so thankful. And yes, he did give me permission that I
Yeah.
wouldn't give myself because once he filed it, I did not contest the divorce. So something inside of me already knew that this was not a viable marriage, but there was the other part of me that was just stronger. And I think there was just a lot of shame around being divorced. I had invested everything.
Yeah.
Like I had nothing outside of that relationship that I had built for myself.
Yeah.
Partly because I was so invested in it, and partly because if I did think about starting something, he would sabotage it. So that was a whole other long
Right.
story. So I think when you see yourself a certain way and you've decided you're going to do a certain thing, it can be really hard to say, I'm not doing this anymore. This isn't working. And I wasn't in an environment that encouraged that thinking or where no one said to me, hey, do you really think your marriage is viable? No one said to me, hey, you've told me things that your husband is doing. You should really consider leaving. The environment I was in was not one that encouraged the safety of the woman or the well being of the woman. The marriage was put above the well being of the individuals in the marriage.